In this session, I'm going to talk about why there are only 21 million Bitcoin. Why and how is it fixed? Why is it specifically fixed at 21 million? What is the total spendable supply if it is way less than 21 million? When is the supply cap expected to be reached? And what happens after it hits the supply cap? Stick around and you will learn answers to all these questions. In this session, we're going to talk about why there are only 21 million Bitcoin. Why and how it's fixed. Why and how is Bitcoin supply fixed? So in order to escape the arbitrary inflation risk, which is managed by the centrally managed currencies and central banks, Bitcoin had to be designed as a network of rules, not rulers. So there are a bunch of rules that were created, resulting in a Bitcoin's fixed supply. I'm going to talk about a little bit detail here. So whenever one of the Bitcoin's predetermined inflation rate is how many Bitcoins will be created and at what rate. So it says initially Bitcoin will mint 50 new Bitcoins per block every 10 minutes. And every 210,000 blocks, that is approximately 4 years, the number of Bitcoins minted per block will halve from 50 to 25. So this rule explains why Bitcoin supply is fixed and allows us to extrapolate the number of total Bitcoins to be ever mined at approximately 21 million. I'm going to discuss a little bit detail here, so just stick around. Now there's something called as controlled supply. So a fixed money supply or a supply altered only in accord with objective and calculable criteria is a necessary condition to a meaningful just price of money. So if you look at this chart here, on the left side you will see the value of money. On the right side you have price level, both on the y-axis. On the x-axis you have the quantity of money and the quantity fixed by the Fed. So if you look at the line, the curved line that intersects between the x-axis and y-axis, so that is the point where there's an equilibrium with the value of money and the price level. So as the value of money goes down, the demand also goes down, as you can see in the curve. So as the value of money goes up towards the top left corner, as the value of money goes up in the top left corner, the supply also goes up. Okay, so this is the level at which the central banks decide. So at an equilibrium point A, the value of money on the left axis and the price level on the right axis have adjusted to bring the quantity of money supplied and the quantity of money demanded into balance. That is the point A. So this actually chart tells you how a controlled supply looks like. Now, a centralized versus a decentralized monetary system, right? So in a centralized economy, a currency is issued by a central bank, that is the Fed, at a rate that is supposed to match the growth of amount of goods that are exchanged so that the goods can be traded with stable prices. The monetary base is controlled by a central bank. In the United States, the Fed increases the monetary base by issuing currency, increasing the amount banks have on reserve, or a process called quantitative easing. Is essentially money printing. Money printing has a fancy term called as QE, which is quantitative easing, which is basically increasing the money supply by the Fed and thus reducing and having this diminishing returns on the fiat currency. So in a decentralized monetary system, currency is created by nodes on a peer-to-peer network. There is no central bank. The Bitcoin generation algorithm defines in advance how currency will be created and what rate. Create an alternative disinflationary money. That was the goal of Bitcoin. And Satoshi created a bunch of rules that ultimately have set and enforced Bitcoin supply at 21 million. It's actually less than 21 million, but let's just say 21 million for now. So as believers in free markets, it's expected that a fixed supply matched with increasing demand will lead to a natural increase in price. So the goal here is when you make a supply fixed, it will create some kind of a scarcity and some kind of value to a currency, and that's what Bitcoin is doing. It is actually increasing in price due to the supply scarcity and the increasing demand due to the network effects will increase the value of Bitcoin. So if you look at this chart here, this is the Bitcoin's controlled supply, and this is number of Bitcoins as a function of block height. So the block reward, as you see here, is a diminishing. It's like diminishing returns. It starts with 52.5 and slowly comes down. And this is the number of Bitcoin that are generated in the system on the y-axis. So on the x-axis, you have the block height, the 210,000 blocks, 420,000, 630,000, and so on. So as you move towards left to right, the supply of Bitcoin slowly increases. So the Bitcoin supply is a function of block height and block reward. The block rewards started at 50 BTC, and the block reward is halved every 210,000 blocks, which is approximately 4 years. So that is why we see a bull cycle every 4 years, approximately. So theoretically, this would lead to a maximum of Bitcoins that tend toward 21 million. But due to a limitation of the data structure of Bitcoin and other factors like some of the coins being lost, some of the coins being logged, the maximum supply of Bitcoins will be actually less than 21 million. So why 21 million? How did this come about? So one Bitcoin can be divided into 10 to the power 8 Satoshis or sats. So there is 100 million is to 1 ratio. As you can see here, there's a 100 million to 1 Satoshi to Bitcoin ratio. And the number of Satoshis must fit within the IEEE floating point system, as you can see in the chart here. It's just a computer science schema that keeps the precise rounded as long as the number is between the 2 to the power 53 quadrillion, as you can see here. Now, it also includes a safety margin of 1 bit that would result in a maximum of 4.5 quadrillion numbers. So the idea behind this is when you have a number like 100 million is to 1, you are looking at the monetary of different countries. So for example, different countries, for example, Dominica, Samoa, Cook Islands, and so on. If you want Bitcoin to reach the parity between 1 Satoshi equals $1, starting with 1 Bitcoin equals to $1, so you have to start somewhere. So if Bitcoin were a country, it would start with the smallest monetary policy when it starts with 1 Bitcoin equal $1, which happened in like 2011. So furthermore, the parity between a US cent, which is like 1/100th of a dollar, and Satoshi, it could be reached if Bitcoin market capitalization became equal to the global monetary supply. So in other words, the number of satoshis must be equal to the global M1 monetary supply. So as of 2009, when the Bitcoin was launched, I think it was about 2 quadrillion US cents. So that is the reason why we have this ratio here, 10 to the power 8 is to 1 for satoshi to Bitcoin. And this is actually a screen grab from the discussion that Finney and Satoshi had discussed about why this has come about. And I think this is a good evidence that suggests that there was some discussion about monetary policy and also about the IEEE number system that would fit in this 21 million. The number 21 million. I'm going to take a moment and describe the total spendable coins. So if you look at this chart here, I've clearly illustrated. So when Bitcoin was first started, we were giving away 50 Bitcoins for every block to the miners. That was only the first 210,000 blocks. And subsequently there was halving to 25 Bitcoin, to 12.5 Bitcoin, to currently now 6.25 Bitcoin per block. And this keeps on going until the year 2104, where the amount of Bitcoins created per block will be actually measured in Satoshis, not in Bitcoins anymore. So that is how the number has come about. That's how the number is being divided. And that's how long it will take for the rewards to expire, for the block rewards to expire. So the true Bitcoins that are available is actually much less because there's a lot of lost Bitcoin. Every day people lose Bitcoins because they forget their passwords, they get hacked, they lose their wallets, they're not fully educated on how to keep the Bitcoin safe. Some people lose on exchanges. Some people lose their two-factor authentication. Some people switch their cell phones. Some people use software wallets, which is not a good idea. Always use hardware wallets to store your Bitcoin. So since starting 2010, about 4% of the available supply of Bitcoin has been lost each year. This puts the current available supply at 13.9 million and well below the 18.3 million, which was publicized not very long ago. So this means that 28% of all the Bitcoins have been irretrievably lost. Recently I heard that a billionaire died and he had some Bitcoins with him. So all these Bitcoins were lost. So people ask me all the time, what happens when Bitcoin reaches 21 million? So for example, let's look at the miner, let's look at from the miner point of view here. So every block provides the miner with two streams of revenue. The first one is the block subsidy and the second was the transaction fee. Now I have here two scales. I have just compared here two time periods. One is the present time period, which is 2021 to 2104, where a miner gets a block subsidy and a transaction fee. But after 2104, there won't be any block subsidy but only the transaction fee. But what the assumption is that in a few decades, when the reward becomes too small, the transaction fee will become the main compensation for miners. This was quoted by Satoshi Nakamoto, who was the founder of Bitcoin. So people ask me what happens. This is what actually happens when the block reward becomes zero. Now, I want to take a moment and tell you about the year 2035. In the year 2035, 99% of the Bitcoins are expected to be mined. And there are a lot of fears about declining block reward because we are reducing the incentive for miners and they won't keep the network secure. That is really overblown. And the organic security trade-off that will occur between the block subsidy and the transaction fees. So understand that the higher the hash rate of Bitcoin, the more secure the network is. And finally, the price elasticity of a Bitcoin transactor is high, even in significantly high fee environments. So Bitcoin block space demand will always grow. I can go into more detail about this. So there is a article published by Dan Held about Bitcoin security. You can just Google it. He talks about the concerns around the Bitcoin security model, which is currently funded by the block subsidy and the transaction fees. As you can see here on the screen here, the block subsidy and the transaction fees. But the larger the Bitcoin network grows, the more secure it becomes. So over the long term, an organic security trade-off will occur between the block subsidy and transaction fees. So as the network effect becomes larger, demand for block space increases and decreasing the need for block subsidy. That is the reason why the algorithm was designed in such a way that the block subsidy reduces once in 4 years. So there is empirical evidence, and the future projections look really good and optimistic. The second thing is there was a bull market of 2017, and it was not that millions of consumers started suddenly using the blockchains to transfer money, and they were seeking to minimize transaction fee, volatility, and so on. It is not the case. Actually, the case was the reduction in the block subsidy actually caused the bull market. And let's talk about block reward. So if you take Bitcoin at a high level, right? So every 10 minutes, a new Bitcoin block is created, which contains the newly minted Bitcoins, plus the transaction fees. That's what the miner is getting right now. But the monetary policy of Bitcoin is hard-coded, and this is known as a disinflationary model. And I just want to highlight it again that by 2035, approximately 99% of the Bitcoins will be mined. So starting 2035, it is very hard to find one full Bitcoin. You'll be very lucky to buy one full Bitcoin in 2035. You might have to buy it in sats or satoshis. So I wanted to take a look at the source code. I've got the source code from the Bitcoin source code, which actually cuts the reward in half whenever it encounters the 210 block height. If you look at this, what's happening is the halving is calculated by the block height divided by the 210,000 blocks. And the subsidy is 50 into coin. Coin actually means 1 Bitcoin. And there is a right bit shift operator that's being used here. As you can see here, note that it cuts the reward in half using the bit shift operator, which means eventually it won't be able to reduce the block reward by exactly half. So question is, how many Bitcoins does it end up making in total? So it's definitely less than 21 million. I hope you had a good understanding of how the Bitcoin system works. And I hope I tried to answer the various questions of Bitcoin in this video. Be sure to subscribe and like this video. Thank you.